Good morning, everyone. And looking out at this crowd, I can tell that it is going to be a great morning. Except looking to my left, I see the clock already says 8:12, and I know how many things we've got to get through before the end of the day, so I would like to get started. My name is Mark Nordenberg. I am the co-chair, along with Laura Ellsworth, of the Eradicate Hate Global Summit. On behalf of Laura, on behalf of the Summit's board, I really do welcome all of you and feel great just looking out and seeing the room as filled as it is early on a Wednesday morning. In the days immediately following the violent attack here in Pittsburgh, the Jewish Federation of Greater Pittsburgh created an independent committee with an initial charge to fairly distribute several millions of dollars that had come to them as undesignated donations through their Victims of Terror Fund. By far the easiest and the most important decision made by the Federation was to ask David Shapira to chair that committee. David was a natural candidate for leadership because of his executive skills, because of the deep reservoir of respect and trust that he enjoyed within this region, and more than anything else, because of his humanity. And he really did an extraordinary job. David opened every meeting with a Kaddish. I was not familiar with that term, but have come to understand that it most generally means a prayer that expresses the values of the Jewish faith, and that in its most common form is a prayer offered in memory of the dead. For the independent committee, David opened every meeting with a Kaddish. And in that setting, he was delivering to us both principles for leadership and really deepening our sense of commitment grounded in true reverence for the work that we had been asked to do. With that as background, we thought it would be very appropriate to ask David if he would open this third annual Eradicate Hate Global Summit. And so I give you David Shapira.
Good morning, everybody. It was very nice of Mark to talk about my experiences leading the committee that was charged with the idea of dividing up the money that came into the Jewish Federation. In leading it, one of the tasks that I got was to pick a diverse committee to help decide what to do with the money. One of the people that we ended up picking was Mark Nordenberg himself, who turned out to be, in many ways, the most valuable person on the committee. If any of you ever would choose to read the report that we wrote at the end, which described the process we went through, Mark is really the author of that report. He's just a wonderful person and a wonderful man. And one of the benefits that I got from this, if there is any such thing as benefit, is getting to know Mark and work with him. He's definitely worth following. In any event, almost 5 years ago, there was a terrible tragedy here in Pittsburgh at the Tree of Life Synagogue, where a gunman came in and murdered 11 people and injured a number more, including some of the first responders. It wasn't the first such tragedy in the United States, and it certainly wasn't the last. As we all know, there have been many more since then. Something unusual happened in Pittsburgh, though, after the tragedy, and that is that the whole community came together to try and do something about the disaster that had happened here. One of the things that grew out of that disaster was this conference. It was started by Laura Ellsworth, who's up here on the stage with me. Mark and Laura worked together, and to me, this is one of the most promising things that happened after the tragedy. In my life, what I have learned is there are all sorts of tragedies. Most of them are not nearly as bad as what happened at the Tree of Life, but we are all subject to tragedy, and everybody gets knocked down at some point or another. To me, I've sort of redefined my definition of success. And I think now that success is what do you do after the tragedy? It's not can you avoid it. It's going to come, something. It's a disease, it's a shooting, who knows what it'll be. But successful people are people who acknowledge the tragedy, learn from it, get up and try and do something about it in the future. And that is the root of this conference. The conference also serves another purpose, which is a memorial to the people who were killed and wounded. And many of the families of those people are here today at the conference. And they have not only had the trauma of having people shot, but then they've recently gone through the trauma of having the man who did it, having to sit through his trial. And I think we ought to honor those people today with a moment of silence. So I'd like to ask everybody to just be silent for a minute in honor of all the people who were harmed. Thank you all. I thought a way to close my little talk this morning and a way to spur on the conference is to talk about a teaching from a book called Pirkei Avot, which means sayings of the fathers. It's a book which talks about famous rabbis from 2,000 years ago who made observations about life. And this book has been preserved and has been passed on down to us. One of the rabbis in that book is named Rabbi Tarfon, and I'm now paraphrasing what he said, but I thought his message is just really pertinent for today and for the people who have come to this conference. He said, "The day is short and the work is plentiful. It is not your duty to finish the work, but neither are you at liberty to neglect it." With that thought in mind, thank you all for coming, and let's hope we can actually do something about hate-fueled violence. Thank you.
Thank you, David. There have been some changes in the summit. since we were gathered together last year, and I want to briefly touch on two of them. The first is that through the first two summits, we were able to do our work only because of the gracious support of the Jewish Federation of Pittsburgh, which acted as our fiscal agent, permitting us to accept donations and to pay bills and to basically do all of the business that needs to be done to support a gathering like this one. With the first two summits behind us, we believed we had established that this was a worthwhile endeavor that should be sustained, and so we have since last fall created a nonprofit corporation. We have obtained tax-exempt certification from the state and federal governments. We have a board, we have board policies, we have board committees, and we're moving forward in a much more formal and legally appropriate fashion. You might not have noticed that. One thing you will notice over the course of the next few days is that we also now have a president. Chuck Moellenberg, a very, very distinguished lawyer, also with management responsibilities, had come to the first summit. He did some volunteering at the second summit, and then, having retired from his law firm, said that he would be willing, on a pro bono basis, to serve as president of the summit for the foreseeable future. That has been a tremendous gift to the cause, and more particularly to Laura and me, who often turn to each other and say, "What did we do before Chuck?" So let me present Chuck Moellenberg, the president of the Eradicate Hate Global Summit.
So now I know that BC, which I thought meant ancient times like myself, at least stands for before Chuck. I can give it a new meaning. Mark is very kind with his words. Let me welcome all of the returning veterans to the summit. It is great to see so many familiar faces out there. We really appreciate all of the ideas that you have contributed over the past couple of years and your continuing enthusiasm for the work of the summit. And for those of you who are attending for the first time, a special welcome. I'm confident that you will leave here much more inspired than when you came in. That was certainly the feeling I had a couple years ago when I was sitting out in the audience and thought, this is an amazing group of people who are coming together to try to make a difference in the world. Laura and Mark asked me to talk about what is new this year. Well, one thing that's new, obviously, is that I'm up here talking with you rather than sitting out there as in the past. So why am I up here? I am retired, at least I thought I was retired, and then Mark and Laura put me to work again, which I'm happy to do. I quickly said yes when Mark and Laura asked me to be president, because I think it's not just a privilege. I view it as a personal responsibility that we all have when we see an horrific event that's happened here in Pittsburgh and other tragic events around the country, to try to do something about it. And I also could not have turned down an offer to team up with Mark and Laura, two of my favorite people in the world, a board of directors that we have that is just outstanding and very active, and the opportunity to work even more closely with all of you out there. One of the board's first actions was to reaffirm the summit's mission. And you will see these words on our website, but to start the summit, I just wanted to repeat them because they are so important. They capture what we're trying to do. And the summit's mission is the Global Summit provides a unique multidisciplinary forum to share ideas and build working relationships to drive the development and deployment of effective approaches to reduce hate-fueled violence. I think that captures why we are all here this week. As Mark said, the goal of the nonprofit corporation is sustainability. We can now build an organization, because we have a legal structure, that can last well into the future. We can hire a professional staff. We can raise funds on our own. One new thing you will see this year is the donate button. Now on our website, for example, we can now do that and raise money on our own. And that's all because we know that this fight against hate will not be won overnight. It's a long battle. We will win it step by step, but it will take years to accomplish. Let me tell you about a few new things at the summit this year. As you will notice from the agenda, we are focusing on the working groups this year. That's because the working groups are the engines that drive the global action, and they will prove the value of a multidisciplinary approach. So we very much thank all of you who have agreed to be members of the working groups. Also new this year are some of the special activities. Many of you, I hope, have already seen the beautiful and meaningful mosaics outside that were contributed by artists all around the country to honor those who lost their lives while worshiping in the 3 congregations at the Tree of Life Synagogue. And thanks to the Peace for Cranes project, you can create origami notes to help others in suffering. Let me highly recommend, too, that you take the time to see the evening movies, which are also new this year. We have 2 powerful documentary films that trace the personal journeys of 2 of our speakers from the time that they were leaders of hate groups to eventually departing those hate groups and now helping others leave hate groups as well. The movies are well worth seeing. Just a few housekeeping matters. So that's part of what I have to do as president. First of all, please read the speaker bios. The introductions of all the speakers will be very short because we want to use the time to hear from them rather than talk about them. But we have such a group of very accomplished speakers. Please do take the time to read their bios. The speaker photo will be at 5:30 this afternoon, right after the keynote speaker. So those of you who are speakers on working groups, board members, global advisors, and community advisors, all please come here to the ballroom at 5:30, and we will have a group photo. Last, you will see that some of the breakout sessions will be closed to the media, closed to the public. Please respect the wishes of those working groups to have their initial meetings in private. So let me close by thanking each one of you for taking the time from your busy lives to be here for the summit. It's greatly appreciated, and we are certain that your creative ideas can and will make a difference, will make our communities more respectful of one another and more peaceful. So thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Pittsburgh. Let me hear you say loud and proud to one another, good morning. The summit, as I say every year, is not just us up here, but it's all of you. And the summit was built from its inception to drive change, to find solutions, to convert talk into action. And in order to do that, we need all of you. The summit is built on the conviction that each one of us, regardless of our profession, our age, where we live, who we know, part of the solution in the fight against hate lies within each one of us. And so the summit is designed to give every single person an opportunity to become a part of these important solutions that the summit is designed to build. And for those of you who were at the first summit, some of us were talking about this morning, the first summit happened in the middle of COVID. And about 100 brave souls came from around the world because they believed in this concept that Mark described of building a summit, of making Pittsburgh not remembered for the horror that happened here to those we loved, but the center of a centrifugal force of the best minds in the world who are actively combating hate in all of its forms. And so in this summit, we have more than 1,200 of you in the room. And the summit, as I think most of you know, is built in 5 parts to move change. Number 1, the best and brightest in the world, that's you, together in person and in Pittsburgh, because those 2 things matter. Pittsburgh is a place that will spark your creativity, that will provide a venue for you to make friendships, to learn things you didn't know, to expand your view of the universe, and to be actively part of the solution. Number 3, we identify deliverables, solutions, specific things to work toward. Number 4, we create multidisciplinary working groups to achieve that thing. And number 5, we have an annual summit year over year to report out how we're doing. This is our first year, as I said. Year 1 was proof of concept in the middle of COVID. Year 2, we formed some work streams to identify what working groups we thought would be the most helpful. We've now done that. This is our first year for the working groups to come together. You'll hear from some of them today. You'll hear about others. They will be working through this year and report out at next year's summit, which for your calendar is October 20th to 23rd, 2024. But fundamentally, we could not do this without all of you. So my ask of each one of you is don't sit there and listen. This is not a conference where you sit there and listen. This is a conference where you sit there and you ask yourself, what can I do? How can I do it? And who do I need to meet in this room that will help me get this done? So that's my call to action for you. And now it's my great privilege to introduce someone who is very dear to the summit, who's going to join me up here for some welcoming remarks. Nick Rasmussen is the Department of Homeland Security's Counterterrorism Coordinator. He reports directly to Secretary Mayorkas, who will be our keynote this afternoon. He is charged with coordinating the counterterrorism activities of DHS system-wide, and he has had 27 years in public service, including across 3 presidential administrations, Bush, Obama, and Trump. He was, before he left government the first time, the director of the National Counterterrorism Center, NCTC. You met the current director last year. And in between government service, he founded what's called the GIFT CT, which is an organization that fights hate online. And for us here at the summit, he has an august career. You can read about it in the program. But for us, Nick was our very first global advisor. When we were just getting off the ground, trying to figure out what we were going to do, I called Nick, and he was just setting up his office at GIFT CT. It was the middle of COVID. I was calling from my living room at home. He was trying to figure out what he was doing. And he said, absolutely yes. What can I do? How can I help you? He came to our advisory committee meetings. He beamed into Pittsburgh. He came to meetings of people who were nobody, but who had a passion and an idea that we believed in, and he believed in us. And he made all the difference in the world to to this summit and everything that it has become. So personally, from the bottom of our hearts, it is my honor and privilege to introduce to you Nick Rasmussen.
So thanks, Laura, for the kind introduction. I really do appreciate it. I think anyone in this room who knows Laura knows that when you've become a friend of Laura, that doesn't go away. You've become a friend for life. And no matter what job you end up being in or where you might migrate professionally, she'll find you and continue the relationship. I also realize that I'm the fourth of 4 individuals charged with welcoming you this morning, and there's only so much welcoming you can probably take. So I'll be very brief. I come to Pittsburgh this week wearing the hat of a senior government official charged with trying to keep communities and individuals safe from the exact kind of hate-fueled violence that was inflicted on the Tree of Life community and on the broader community of this great city of Pittsburgh. Every day at DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, I have the honor to work with passionate, committed colleagues who have devoted their professional lives and more than a little of their personal time working on the challenge of confronting hate-fueled violence. When I say that, I'm talking about intelligence professionals who are working very hard to understand and anticipate the evolving threat. I'm talking about prevention professionals working to provide communities with the tools and resources they need to protect themselves. And I'm talking about partner engagement professionals I work with who spend week after week after week on the road, traveling around the country, meeting with and listening to communities that are impacted by this kind of hate-fueled violence. The work I see around me every day at DHS inspires and motivates me. How could it not make you want to do better to work with such a collection of people? As Laura also indicated, we're going to hear later today from my boss, the Secretary of Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas. He's speaking in a keynote role. And I know from talking to him personally about this event that he's excited and pleased to be with us today. These issues are very personal to him, and I suspect you'll get a flavor of that from his remarks later today. But given my current responsibilities at DHS, there's really no place in the world that I could imagine being today other than here in Pittsburgh. Now, as Laura referenced, and as some in the audience may recall, I've attended previous summits wearing another hat, that of the head of a small NGO called GIFCT, working hard to do good things in the online space by engaging with technology companies. And I suspect that whether it's 2 years from now or 4 years from now or 10 years from now, whatever job or role I happen to be in at that point, I will probably be here in Pittsburgh along with many or most of you, taking account, as Laura suggested, of the progress we've made, but also about the work that lies ahead. So what makes Eradicate Hate the must-attend center of the universe type event for the community of people dedicated to making the world kinder, safer, and more tolerant? The answer is pretty obvious and pretty simple. It's the collection of people around the room who are here this week with us in Pittsburgh. Experts from every imaginable discipline, faith leaders of every denomination, survivors and their support networks, government officials, NGO practitioners, and so many, many more. And that's testament to what Laura and Mark and the people of Pittsburgh have created with this event, with this organization, and with this Eradicate Hate community. And it is a community at this point. The challenge, of course, every year when the group comes together is to move the needle, not just to admire the problem or bemoan the state of the world. The challenge is to create solution pathways that did not exist before, to make connections and partnerships that result in more capacity, more capability, more creativity, more solutions. So it's in that spirit that I will do what Laura asked me to do, because I always do what Laura asks me to do, and that is to welcome you, each and every one of you, to this year's Eradicate Hate Global Summit. And beyond just welcoming you, I would ask and urge that each of you bring every bit of yourselves to the next few days of conversation so that next year the task we have in front of us of eradicating hate just seems a little bit more within our reach. So thank you, Laura, and I look forward to the rest of the week.